I still remember the sound of rain on metal, that hollow rhythmic drumming that filled our tiny apartment every monsoon season. It was the soundtrack of my childhood, constant as a heartbeat and just as easy to ignore until it stopped. My mother used to say that rain washes everything clean, but she was wrong. Some stains go deeper than water can reach. I learned that truth on a Tuesday in July, when I was 16 years old, and still believed that good intentions could fix anything, when I still thought the world was divided neatly into right and wrong, deserving and undeserving, saved and lost. Before I understood that life happens in the spaces between those categories, in the grey areas where most of us actually live. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, in the small apartment on the 4th floor of a building that should have been condemned years ago, where the walls were thin enough to hear our neighbours' arguments and the ceiling leaked in 3 different places when it rained. Our apartment smelled like turmeric and hope. That's how I think of it now. Mama would come home from her nursing shifts at the public hospital, exhausted down to her bones, and still find the energy to cook dinner for Kareem and me. Still find the strength to ask about homework and scraped knees and friendship drama. Still manage to smile like everything was fine, like our world hadn't cracked down the middle 6 months earlier when Baba left. I was 16, old enough to see through her performance, but young enough to pretend I didn't. Old enough to carry grocery bags and pick up Kareem from school and help with dinner, but young enough to resent it sometimes. That age when you're caught between childhood and whatever comes after, when everything feels too big and too small at the same time. Kareem was 7, all boundless energy and questions that had no good answers. He had Baba's eyes, which sometimes made Mama look away when she thought he wasn't watching. He collected rocks and told elaborate stories and believed, with the certainty that only children possess, that everything would work out fine in the end. I envied that certainty. I'd lost mine somewhere around the night I heard Mama crying in the bathroom, thinking the sound of running water would cover it. Our building sat in one of those neighbourhoods that people with options moved away from. Cramped, noisy, overlooking a main road where buses rattled past at all hours. But it was home. The chai-walla on the corner knew how we took our tea. The fruit seller saved the best mangoes for Mama. The kids in the building played cricket in the narrow courtyard, and their laughter echoed off concrete walls like music. This was the world I knew. Small, maybe. Limited, probably. But ours. And then came that Tuesday, and everything changed. The monsoon had started early that year. By July, it felt like the city had been underwater forever, like we'd forgotten what dry ground felt like. The rain came in waves, sometimes a gentle patter, sometimes a roar that drowned out every other sound. Our roof leaked worse than usual, and we'd placed buckets and pans strategically around the apartment to catch the drips. At night, the different tones, ping, pong, plop, created an odd sort of symphony. Kareem thought it was funny. He'd assigned each bucket a musical note and made up songs using the rain's rhythm. That was my brother, finding joy in the smallest things, making games out of inconveniences. Sometimes I wanted to preserve that in him, to keep him from ever becoming cynical. Other times I wanted to shake him and say, "Wake up, nothing is okay." But I never did. Maybe because Mama needed at least one of us to stay optimistic. Maybe because watching his innocence felt like watching something rare and precious that would disappear soon enough without my help. That Tuesday started like any other. Mama left for her shift at dawn, moving quietly through the apartment in her white uniform, careful not to wake us. I heard her anyway, I always did, but kept my eyes closed and listened to her routine. The clink of her bangles, the shuffle of her shoes, the soft click of the door, the sound of someone carrying the weight of a family on shoulders that weren't meant to bear it alone. I got up an hour later and made breakfast, chai and paratha, nothing fancy. Kareem stumbled out of our shared room with sleep still in his eyes and his hair sticking up in every direction. "Is it raining?" he asked, which was a pointless question because, of course, it was raining. It was always raining. "Yes, John. Wear your raincoat to school." "I can't find it. It's on the hook by the door where it always is." "No, that's the old one, the hole. Patch it with tape like I showed you." He made a face but didn't argue. We'd learned not to ask Mama for things we didn't absolutely need. New raincoats fell into the category of luxury, along with new shoes before the old ones fell apart completely, and eating out anywhere fancier than the street vendor who sold samosas for 10 rupees. I watched Karim eat his breakfast, tomato ketchup somehow ending up on his nose despite the complete absence of tomatoes in his meal, and felt that familiar mix of love and responsibility that had become the defining feature of my life. He was my brother, yes, but lately he felt like more than that, like a piece of myself I had to protect. Sarah, he looked up at me with those two knowing eyes. Why do you always look so sad? I'm not sad. Yes, you are, even when you're smiling. Children, I was learning, see things adults pretend not to notice. I'm just tired, I said, which was true but not the whole truth. Now finish your breakfast or you'll be late. School was a blur that day, as it usually was. I went through the motions, attending classes, taking notes, nodding when teachers spoke to me, but my mind was elsewhere, calculating numbers that never quite added up. Rent, utilities, food, Karim's school fees. The medication Mama needed for her blood pressure but kept forgetting to buy because it was expensive. My best friend Zara noticed my distraction during lunch. "You're doing it again," she said, stealing a piece of roti from my tiffin. "Doing what?" "That thing where you're physically here but mentally somewhere else, probably worrying about stuff you can't control." Zara had the kind of easy confidence that came from having two parents and financial security and a future that didn't feel like a tightrope walk. I loved her, but sometimes I resented how simple her problems seemed. Boy trouble, grade stress, normal teenage concerns that felt like luxuries I couldn't afford. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You're always fine, which means you're never fine." She studied me with the directness that made her both a good friend and occasionally exhausting. "Sarah, you know you can talk to me, right? About anything?" "I know, but you won't." "There's nothing to talk about." She sighed, recognizing a closed door when she saw one. "Offer stands, anytime." I nodded, grateful and guilty in equal measure. Grateful for her friendship, guilty that I couldn't give her the honesty she deserved. But how could I explain what it felt like to be 16 and parenting a 7-year-old while watching your mother slowly disappear into exhaustion? How could I make her understand that every rupee mattered, that just buying anything wasn't an option, that the future everyone else took for granted felt like a luxury I couldn't afford to imagine? So I smiled and changed the subject, and we talked about easier things until the bell rang. The rain was worse by the time school ended. Not the gentle monsoon drizzle, but the angry kind that came down in sheets, turning the world grey and indistinct. I stood under the overhang by the school gate, watching students run for buses or pile into cars that pulled up with precision timing, parents behind the wheel or drivers in uniform waiting patiently. I pulled out my phone, an old model that Mama had given me with strict instructions to use it only for emergencies, and checked the time. Karim's school let out in 20 minutes. I'd have to run to make it. The walk to his school usually took 15 minutes in good weather. In rain like this, with flooded streets and traffic backed up, it would take longer. I calculated routes in my head, looking for the path with the least flooding, the fewest obstacles. This was my life now. Constant calculation, constant adaptation, moving through the city like a chess piece, always 3 moves ahead, always anticipating problems before they arrived. I took a breath, pulled my dupatta over my head for whatever minimal protection it offered, and stepped into the rain. The city transformed during monsoon. Streets became rivers, cars became boats. People waded through water that rose past their ankles, past their knees, holding bags and briefcases overhead like offerings to indifferent gods. The smell was distinct. Wet earth, exhaust fumes, rotting garbage, and something else underneath it all that might have been desperation or just urban decay. I navigated by memory more than sight, knowing where the potholes hid under the water, where the sidewalk dropped off suddenly, where you had to walk single file because the flooding was too deep elsewhere. My clothes were soaked through within minutes, my shoes squelching with each step. But I kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option. A bus roared past, creating a wake that splashed brown water up to my waist. I gasped at the cold shock of it, tasting the gritty mix of rain and street runoff in my mouth. The passengers inside stared out with that peculiar blank expression people wear when witnessing others' misfortune from a safe distance. I thought about Baba briefly and bitterly. Wondered where he was right now. Probably somewhere dry. Probably not thinking about his daughter wading through floodwater to pick up his son. Probably with her, the woman from his office, the one who didn't have stretch marks or tired eyes or 2 children who still waited for him to call. I shook my head, literally trying to shake the thoughts loose. Anger was a luxury too. It required energy I needed for other things. Karim's school came into view, finally, a 2-story building painted cheerful yellow that looked grey under the heavy sky. Parents were already gathering, a cluster of umbrellas and raincoats and patient waiting. I scanned for my brother's face among the children spilling out the doors, shouting and laughing despite the weather, because children are resilient in ways adults forget how to be. There, that mess of dark hair and oversized backpack. That careful hop-skip over puddles that wouldn't make any difference since he was already soaked. "Sarah!" He ran toward me, backpack bouncing, face lit up like I was the best thing he'd seen all day. And just like that, the frustration and exhaustion and bitterness dissolved. Because this was what mattered. This smile, this trust, this small person who needed me. I took his hand, smaller and warmer than seemed possible, and started the long walk home. "Sarah," Karim said as we navigated the flooded streets, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant a difficult question was coming. "Why does Baba never come home anymore?" My throat tightened. This question again. He asked it in different ways, at different times, but always with the same confused hope underneath. Like maybe this time the answer would be different. Like maybe this time I'd say, "You're right, he's coming home tomorrow. He's working, Beta, very far away." But doesn't he miss us? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes people choose to leave? That sometimes love isn't enough? That sometimes fathers walk away from their families because it's easier than staying? "Of course he misses you," I lied, hating myself for it, but unable to give him the truth. "Not yet, maybe not ever. But sometimes grown-ups have to do things they don't want to do." Mama says that too, but she sounds sad when she says it. Mama works very hard. That's why she sounds tired sometimes. Not tired, sad. He looked up at me with those impossibly wise eyes. "You sound sad too." I squeezed his hand instead of answering. What could I say? That yes, we were sad. That we were drowning in a different kind of flood, one made of bills and broken promises and the daily grind of survival. That I was 16 and felt 40 and couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to. "Race you to the corner," I said instead, because distraction was easier than honesty. His face lit up and he was off, splashing through puddles with the abandon of someone who didn't yet understand that wet socks were a problem when you only owned 2 pairs. I let him win, because small victories matter when you can't give someone the big ones they deserve. We were almost home, maybe 3 blocks away, when I saw her. She was standing under the awning of the pharmacy that had closed down 6 months ago, pressed against the metal grating like she was trying to disappear into it. At first glance, she was just another person seeking shelter from the rain. The streets were full of them, clusters of humanity waiting out the worst of the downpour. But something made me look twice. Maybe it was the way she stood, absolutely still, when everyone else shifted and fidgeted. Maybe it was her clothes, soaked through not just with rain, but with something that looked like sweat or tears or both. Maybe it was the way she held something bundled in her arms, clutched so tight her knuckles were white. Maybe it was just that I'd learned to recognize desperation when I saw it. I slowed without meaning to, my feet making the decision before my brain caught up. Karim tugged my hand. "Sarah, why are we stopping?" "Wait here a second." "But we're almost home." "Just wait. Right here. Don't move." I approached slowly, instinctively cautious in the way you are when something feels off. Up close I could see she was young, probably not much older than me, maybe 18 or 19. Her dupatta hung limp around her shoulders, plastered to her skin. Her hair stuck to her face in dark strands, and her eyes were somewhere else entirely, looking at something none of us could see. "Excuse me," I said softly, the way you might speak to someone sleepwalking. Are you okay? Do you need help? She didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. I moved closer, and that's when I saw what she was holding. A baby, wrapped in what had once been a white blanket, now grey with water and dirt, and the baby wasn't crying, wasn't doing any of the things babies are supposed to do. My stomach dropped. "Miss," I tried again, louder now. "Miss, are you—" "He won't wake up." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the rain like a knife. "I've been trying and trying, but he won't wake up." The world seemed to slow down. I could hear my own heartbeat, suddenly too loud. Could hear Karim shifting behind me, probably moving closer despite my instructions. Could hear the rain drumming its constant rhythm, indifferent to the small tragedy unfolding beneath it. "How long?" I asked, though I already knew the answer wouldn't be good. "Since morning. Since." She blinked, slowly, like she was trying to remember something from a very long time ago, since I woke up and he was just quiet. "We need to get you help. The hospital is—" "No." The word came out sharp, sudden, cutting through her fog. Her arms tightened around the small bundle. "No hospitals, no police. They'll take him, they'll say it's my fault." "But you need—" "You don't understand." Her eyes focused on me for the first time, and I saw something in them that made my breath catch. Not just grief, not just shock, but fear. Deep, primal, all-consuming fear. They always blame the mother. Always. They'll say I didn't feed him right or hold him right or love him right. They'll say I killed him. No one will. Yes, they will. Her voice cracked. Because I'm not married. Because his father left. Because I'm nobody and nothing, and they'll say I deserved this, that he deserved this, that we're both better off. She couldn't finish. The words dissolved into a sound that wasn't quite crying, wasn't quite breathing, just a desperate gasp for air that wouldn't come. I stood frozen, 16 years old and completely out of my depth, watching this girl fall apart in front of me. Part of me wanted to run, to take Karim's hand and keep walking and pretend I'd never seen this, to let someone else deal with this impossible situation. But I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw things I recognized. The way she held herself small, like making yourself smaller, might make the world's cruelty hurt less. The exhaustion carved into her young face. The desperation of someone with no good options. I thought about Mama working herself to exhaustion to keep us afloat after Baba left. About the way people in our building sometimes whispered about how some thought she must have done something wrong to drive him away. About how women are always blamed, always judged, always found wanting. And I made a decision that would change everything. Okay, I said quietly. No hospitals, no police, but you can't stay here. Come with us, just for tonight, just to get dry and figure out what comes next. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Come with you? Why would you? Don't even know me. No, I agreed, but I know what it's like to need help, and I know that leaving you here isn't an option. It wasn't eloquent, it wasn't wise, it probably wasn't even particularly kind, just the bare minimum of human decency that shouldn't have felt extraordinary, but somehow did. Behind me, Karim's small voice. "Sarah, what's happening?" I turned to find him staring at the bundle in the girl's arms, his face scrunched up in that way children's faces get when they're trying to understand something that doesn't make sense. "We're going to help," I told him simply. "Like Mama always says we should." He nodded slowly, accepting this with the easy faith that comes from being 7 and believing your older sister always knows what to do. I wished I had that faith in myself. I turned back to the girl. "My name is Sarah. This is my brother Karim. Our apartment is just a few blocks away. Our mother is a nurse. She'll know what to do. She'll help without judgment. I promise." The girl studied my face for a long moment, and I wondered what she saw there. Probably not wisdom or maturity or any quality that would inspire confidence. Just another kid, wet and tired, and probably in over her head. But maybe that was enough. Maybe when you're drowning, you don't need a lifeguard, just someone willing to reach out a hand. "Nadia," she whispered finally. "My name is Nadia." "Okay, Nadia, let's get you somewhere dry." Walking the 3 remaining blocks to our apartment felt like the longest journey of my life. Nadia moved like a ghost, shuffling beside me with her eyes fixed straight ahead, still clutching her son's body with terrible tenderness. Karim stayed close to my other side, unusually quiet, his small hand gripping mine tight. People passed us on the street, umbrellas tilted against the rain, and not one of them looked twice. A soaked girl carrying what could have been laundry or groceries or a dead child, and the city just flowed around us like water around stone. I wondered if they didn't see or if they chose not to. I wondered which was worse. Our building looked shabbier than usual through the rain, the yellow paint flaking off in chunks, water streaming down the walls like tears. I guided Nadia up the stairs, praying we wouldn't run into Mrs. Kapoor from the second floor, who had opinions about everything and shared them loudly with anyone who'd listen. The stairs were slick and Nadia stumbled twice, but kept her grip on her bundle, never letting go, never loosening her hold on the one thing she had left. Our apartment was on the 4th floor, and by the time we reached it, all 3 of us were breathing hard. I fumbled with the keys, my fingers clumsy with cold and nerves, before finally getting the door open. Inside, the apartment looked smaller than ever. The furniture we'd inherited from Mama's mother, mismatched and worn but clean. The photos on the wall carefully arranged to hide the places where paint was peeling. The buckets placed strategically to catch the leaks, now full and needing to be emptied. Our whole life contained in 3 rooms and a kitchen too small to eat in. And now a stranger carrying her dead child into our living room. "Sit," I told Nadia, guiding her to the sofa that sagged in the middle. "Please, just sit." She lowered herself mechanically, still holding the baby. I exchanged a look with Karim, whose face had gone pale. "Karim, go get some towels, the clean ones from the bathroom, and maybe a glass of water." He nodded and fled, clearly grateful for a task, for permission to escape the heavy weight filling the room. I knelt in front of Nadia, not quite knowing what to say. How do you speak to someone whose world has just ended? What words could possibly be right? "Nadia," I started, then stopped. Started again. "When will our mother come home?" That seemed safer than asking about the baby, than acknowledging the terrible reality we were all pretending not to see. "I don't know what time it is," she said distantly. "I lost track. It's been raining so long. She'll be home in a few hours. She works the day shift. She'll know what to do." "Will she call the police?" "No," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Not if we ask her not to. Not until we figure out the right thing to do." "What is the right thing?" Nadia's eyes finally focused on me, searching my face for answers I didn't have. "Tell me, because I don't know anymore. I don't know anything." Karim returned with the towels, moving carefully like he was carrying something precious. He handed them to me without speaking, and I noticed his eyes kept sliding away from Nadia, from what she held. "Here," I said gently, holding out a towel. "You're soaking wet. You need to get warm." I can't let go of him. If I let go, that means he's really gone. That means I have to. Her voice broke completely, and she bent forward over the baby, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient. The sound of a mother's grief, old as humanity itself and just as raw. I looked at Karim helplessly. He looked back at me with the same confusion and fear. We were kids playing at being adults in a situation that would challenge anyone. "I'm going to make chai," I said finally, because that's what Mama always did when things were bad. Tea fixed nothing but gave you something to hold, something warm to focus on when everything else was cold. "Just try to breathe. We'll figure this out." In the kitchen, I put the kettle on with shaking hands. Through the doorway, I could see Nadia rocking slightly, back and forth, the universal motion of mothers soothing babies. Except this baby would never wake, would never cry or laugh or grow. Karim appeared beside me, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, that baby, is he—" "Yes, but why is she still holding him?" How do you explain grief to a 7-year-old? How do you make someone understand that sometimes holding on to what's lost is the only thing that keeps you from falling apart completely? "Because she's his mother," I said softly, "and letting go is the hardest thing in the world." "Will Mama be mad that we brought her here?" It was a fair question. We'd just invited a stranger with a dead child into our home without permission. Most parents would be furious, but Mama wasn't most parents. "No," I said, hoping I was right. "Mama will understand, she always does." The kettle whistled and I made 3 cups of chai, heavy on the sugar like Mama made it when someone was in shock. My hands steadied with the familiar routine. Tea, sugar, milk, cardamom. Simple things, comforting things. I carried the cups to the living room. Nadia took hers automatically, still holding the baby with one arm, and I watched her wrap her fingers around the warmth without drinking. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to do this, any of this." "Everyone needs help sometimes," I said, echoing what Mama had told me 100 times. "There's no shame in it. People will say there is. People always do." She wasn't wrong. I thought about the way our neighbours had looked at Mama after Baba left. The whispers that followed us, the assumptions about what she must have done wrong, the way society was always ready to blame women for men's failures. "People say a lot of things," I replied. "Most of it isn't worth listening to." Nadia smiled. Just barely. A ghost of an expression. "You sound older than you look." "I had to grow up fast." "Yeah, me too." We sat in silence as the rain continued its endless drumming and the afternoon light faded slowly toward evening. Karim curled up in the corner with a book, pretending to read but watching Nadia from the corner of his eye. I kept checking the clock, willing Mama to come home, to take this impossible situation and somehow make it manageable. Eventually, Nadia started to talk. "His name is Hamza," she said quietly, looking down at the bundle in her arms. "He was 4 months old. Born on March 15th at 3:47 in the morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect, except he never stopped crying. The nurses said some babies are just fussy. They said I'd learn what he needed." She paused, her thumb stroking the blanket gently. "But I never did. I never figured it out. I tried everything. Feeding, changing, holding, singing, walking, rocking. Nothing worked for long. He'd cry and cry and cry, and I'd cry too because I didn't know how to help him. I thought I was doing something wrong. That I was a bad mother." "You weren't." I started, but she kept talking like she hadn't heard me. "His father left 3 weeks after he was born, said he couldn't handle the noise, the responsibility, said he was too young to be tied down. He was 22, I was 17. She laughed, a bitter sound. 17 and stupid enough to believe him when he said he loved me, stupid enough to think love mattered. Kareem's eyes were huge, processing information no 7-year-old should have to hear. But I couldn't send him away. This was real life, raw and messy, and maybe he needed to see it. Maybe we all did. "My family disowned me when they found out I was pregnant," Nadia continued. "My father said I'd brought shame on them. My mother cried but didn't argue. My sisters stopped answering my calls. Just like that, I was alone. Where did you go?" I asked softly. "A women's shelter at first. They were kind but crowded. Too many women, too many stories like mine. I got a job at a shop, just a few hours a week. Not enough money, but something. The shelter let me stay until Hamza was born, and then they helped me find a room. One room in a building where half the apartments were empty. Cheap because no one else wanted to live there." She took a shaky breath. "Last night, Hamza finally stopped crying. I remember thinking, thank God, finally some peace. I fell asleep hard, harder than I had in months. When I woke up this morning, he was just still, so still. I picked him up, tried to wake him, but he was cold and he wouldn't. The words dissolved into tears again, and I moved to sit beside her, putting my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, this stranger, and cried like the world was ending. Because for her, it had. Mama came home at 6:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I was watching the clock, counting down the minutes, praying she'd arrive before this situation somehow got worse. I heard her key in the lock and stood up quickly, intending to intercept her, to explain before she saw, but she was through the door before I could move, already talking. "Sarah? Beta, I stopped at the market and got..." She froze. Her eyes took in the scene. Me standing rigid with worry, Kareem in the corner looking scared, and Nadia on our sofa, soaked through and holding something that was clearly too still. 20 years of nursing experience meant Mama recognized the situation immediately. I saw it happen on her face, the flash of understanding, the quick assessment, the decision about what came next. She set down the market bags carefully and removed her rain-soaked dupatta, moving with deliberate calm. "Hello," she said gently, walking toward Nadia. "My name is Syra. I'm a nurse. Can I help you?" Nadia looked up at her, and something in Mama's face, the kindness maybe, or the lack of judgment, made her crumble again. "My baby," she managed to say. "My baby is dead. Mama's face did something complicated, pain and compassion and professional composure all at once. She knelt beside Nadia, slowly, carefully. "May I see him?" Nadia hesitated, then slowly, so slowly, loosened her grip enough for Mama to look. I watched my mother examine the bundle with practiced efficiency, her face betraying nothing, but when she looked back up at Nadia, her eyes were soft. "What's his name?" "Hamza." "How long?" "Since this morning. Since I woke up." Mama nodded, absorbing this. Then she looked at me, a question in her eyes. I nodded slightly. "We'd talk later." She turned back to Nadia. "Nadia, I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to be honest with me. Not for judgment, but so I know how to help. Can you do that?" Nadia nodded mutely. "Were you alone with Hamza when this happened?" "Yes." "Was he sleeping on his back?" "Yes, always. They said always on his back. Has he been sick? Fever? Trouble breathing?" "No, he was fine, just fussy." "Always fussy, but fine." Mama asked several more questions, gentle but thorough, about prenatal care, about Hamza's health history, about the circumstances of the past few days. Nadia answered each one with the exhausted honesty of someone who had nothing left to lose. Finally, Mama sat back. "Nadia, from what you're telling me, this sounds like SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. It's not common, but it happens, and it's not your fault. Do you understand? It's not your fault." But everyone will say, "I don't care what everyone says. I'm telling you, as a medical professional, this wasn't your fault. Some babies die and we don't know why. It's heartbreaking and unfair and horrible, but it's not because you did something wrong." Nadia's face crumpled. "But I was relieved. When he finally stopped crying, I was relieved. What kind of mother? An exhausted one, a human one. Feeling relieved isn't the same as wishing harm. You loved your son. That's clear in how you're holding him. That's clear in your grief." Mama looked at me then, and I saw the question in her eyes. I answered before she could ask. "She's afraid to go to the hospital, afraid they'll blame her." "Will they?" Nadia asked desperately. "Will they take him away and treat him like evidence instead of my baby?" Mama was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her weighing truth against comfort. She chose truth. "Some might," she admitted. "The system isn't always kind to young mothers, especially unmarried ones. They'll ask questions, they'll investigate, it's protocol." "So I can't go, I can't let them—" "But," Mama interrupted firmly, "that doesn't mean we can't do this right. That doesn't mean Hamza doesn't deserve a proper goodbye, and it doesn't mean you have to face this alone." She stood up and pulled out her phone. "I'm going to make some calls. I know people, a social worker I trust, a doctor who won't judge. We'll get Hamza's death certified properly, quietly, with dignity. No police unless necessary. No media, just the paperwork needed to let you bury your son and grieve properly. Does that sound okay?" Nadia stared at her like she was seeing a miracle. "Why would you do this? You don't know me." Mama smiled sadly. "Because I'm a mother too. Because I know what it's like to struggle alone. And because that's what we do. We help each other when the world fails us. It's not charity, Nadia. It's just humanity." The next few hours blurred together. Mama made her phone calls, speaking in low, urgent tones from the kitchen. I made more tea. Kareem eventually fell asleep in the corner, exhausted from the emotional weight of the day. And Nadia sat on our sofa, still holding Hamza, whispering things to him that I couldn't hear but didn't need to. A woman named Fatima arrived around 9, one of Mama's friends from the hospital who worked in social services. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that somehow managed to be comforting. She sat with Nadia for a long time, talking quietly, taking notes, explaining what would happen next, making calls to people who owed her favours, who could help navigate the system without putting Nadia through more trauma. "We can get the death certificate issued without a full investigation," Fatima explained. "I have a doctor who'll examine the baby and sign off if it looks like SIDS. No autopsy unless there are signs of abuse, which I doubt there will be. The paperwork can be done quickly and quietly." "And then?" Nadia asked. "And then you decide how you want to say goodbye. Burial, cremation, whatever feels right to you. We can help arrange it. There are funds for women in difficult situations." "I don't have money for a funeral." "You don't need it. We'll manage. You just need to decide what you want." Nadia looked down at Hamza, her face full of a grief so profound it hurt to witness. I want him to have a name on his grave, she whispered. I want people to know he existed, that he mattered. He did matter, Mama said firmly. And he will have that, I promise. The doctor arrived near midnight, a woman in her 50s who Mama introduced as Dr. Qureshi. She examined Hamza with practiced efficiency but genuine gentleness in our small living room that suddenly felt like a examination room. Afterwards, she spoke to Nadia with the kind of directness that came from years of delivering hard news. I'm ruling this as probable SIDS. There are no signs of neglect or abuse. Your son appears to have been well cared for. This was a tragedy, but not a crime. Do you understand the difference? Nadia nodded, tears streaming silently down her face. I'll file the certificate in the morning. The authorities may have follow-up questions, but with my report and Fatima's advocacy, I don't anticipate problems. You have my number if you need anything. She left quietly, the way all good doctors learn to exit rooms filled with grief. Fatima stayed longer, making arrangements, calling in favours. By 1 a.m, she'd secured everything: a burial plot, a funeral director who'd worked discreetly, financial assistance from a charity fund. 3 days, she told Nadia. We can have the burial in 3 days. That gives you time to process, to prepare. Where will I stay until then? Nadia asked, and I saw the fear flash across her face, the reality of having nowhere to go, of being completely alone with this grief. Mama and I exchanged a glance. Here, Mama said simply, you'll stay here. I couldn't. Yes, you could. We have space. Not much, but enough. You shouldn't be alone right now. But people will talk, your neighbours. Let them talk, Mama said, with the wariness of someone who'd been talked about plenty. Their opinions are cheaper than the electricity they waste gossiping. You're staying, and that's final. We made up the sofa for Nadia that night. Mama found clean clothes for her, too big but dry, helped her change out of her soaked things with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd tended to countless patients in worse conditions. And then came the hardest part. Nadia, Mama said gently, we need to prepare Hamza, to keep him preserved until the burial. Do you understand? Nadia's face went white, but she nodded. Can I help? If you want to, but you don't have to. I want to. I need to. He's my son. I should be the one. So, in our tiny bathroom, by the light of a single bulb, my mother showed this girl how to wash and dress her dead baby for the last time. I stayed with Karim, who'd woken up confused and frightened, and tried to explain what was happening in words that wouldn't traumatize him further. The baby died, Jan. Sometimes babies die, even when everyone tries their best, and now his mother needs to say goodbye properly. Like when Nani died, and we had the funeral? Yes, like that. Will the baby go to heaven? Yes, I said, because what else could I say? He'll go to heaven. That's good, Karim said sleepily. Heaven is nice. Nani is there. He drifted back to sleep, and I envied his ability to accept these simple comforts. To believe in neat endings and afterlives where everyone was okay. I'd lost that faith somewhere along the way. Later, much later, after Nadia had finally cried herself to sleep on our sofa and Karim was deeply unconscious in our room, I found Mama sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. You should be sleeping, she said without looking up. So should you. Can't. She rubbed her eyes tiredly. Tiredly? Too much thinking. I sat down across from her. Are you angry that I brought her here? Mama looked at me for a long moment. No, Beta, I'm not angry. She paused, searching for words. I'm proud. You saw someone in need and you helped. You didn't walk away or tell yourself it wasn't your problem. That takes courage. It didn't feel like courage. It just felt like the only thing I could do. That's what courage is, usually. Not feeling brave, just doing what needs doing anyway. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me since Mama arrived home. Why are you helping her? Really? We don't have money for extra mouth to feed. We're barely managing as it is. Mama smiled sadly. You know, when your father left, I felt like the world was judging me, like I'd failed somehow, like I wasn't enough. That's not. I know it's not true, but it felt true. And in those first weeks when everything seemed impossible, you know what kept me going? Small acts of kindness. Mrs. Lal from downstairs bringing up extra food, the pharmacist letting me pay later for my blood pressure medication, Fatima, who I barely knew then, just listening without judgment. She reached across and took my hand. We help because we've needed help, because Nadia's situation could be any of ours with slightly different circumstances, because women have to help each other in a world that's designed to tear us down. That's not charity, Sarah. That's survival. I squeezed her hand, understanding but also worried. But what about us? What about rent and bills and... We'll manage. We always do. One day, 1 rupee at a time. That's all any of us can do. The next 3 days were strange, living with grief as a house guest, watching someone navigate the worst experience of their life in our small living room. Nadia barely spoke. She went through the motions, eating when Mama insisted, drinking chai we pressed into her hands, staring at the walls with eyes that saw nothing. Fatima came by daily, handling the endless paperwork that death requires. Dr. Qureshi checked in by phone, and Hamza lay in our bedroom, kept cool and preserved, waiting for his final rest. Karim struggled with it. He had nightmares the first night, woke up crying about babies who wouldn't wake up. Mama held him and rocked him and whispered reassurances until he calmed. Why did this happen, he asked me the next morning. Why did God let the baby die? I had no answer. I didn't believe in the kind of God who had plans and reasons anymore. I believed in random chance and bad luck and a world that was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. But I couldn't tell that to my 7-year-old brother. I don't know, John. Sometimes bad things happen and there's no good reason. But look at what we can do. We can help. We can make it a little less terrible. Maybe that's what we're here for. He thought about this seriously. So we can't stop bad things, but we can make them less bad? Something like that. Okay, he said, accepting this with the flexibility of childhood. That's good enough, I guess. The rain finally stopped on the 3rd day. The sun came out, hesitant and watery, turning puddles into mirrors and making the city glitter in that way it only does after days of darkness. The burial was that afternoon. It was a small affair, just us, Fatima, Dr. Qureshi, and a few women from the shelter where Nadia had stayed. No family, no friends, just a handful of people who knew what it meant to be cast out by society. The cemetery was in the old part of the city, crowded with graves packed tight like the buildings around them. The section for children was in the back, smaller headstones marking smaller tragedies. Hamza's grave was tiny, heartbreakingly tiny. The funeral director was kind and efficient, handling everything with quiet professionalism. The prayers were said. The small white bundle was lowered into the earth, and Nadia stood at the edge, tears streaming silently down her face, whispering things none of us could hear. Mama stood beside her with one arm around her shoulders. Fatima held her other hand. A circle of women holding each other up against the weight of the world. Karim held my hand tight, watching with wide eyes as they filled in the grave. That's really small, he whispered. Yes. He was really small too, right? Yes. It's not fair. No, it's not. I don't like this. Neither do I, Beta. Neither do I. After the burial, we went back to the apartment in silence. Nadia moved like a ghost. There, but not there. Functioning, but not living. Fatima pulled Mama aside and spoke in low tones about next steps, counselling resources, support groups, job opportunities, practical matters that had to be addressed even in the midst of grief. She can't stay with us forever, I overheard Mama say. We don't have the space or resources. I know, Fatima replied. Give her a week to stabilise, then we'll look at options. The shelter has a bed open. There are programmes. They talked about Nadia like she wasn't a person but a problem to be solved. And I understood it was necessary, but hated it anyway. Hated that grief had a timeline, that healing had to be scheduled around available resources. That evening, Nadia asked to speak to me alone. We sat on the small balcony that overlooked the street, where Mama kept a few plants that stubbornly refused to die despite neglect. I'm leaving tomorrow, she said without preamble. Fatima said you could stay longer. I know, but I need to go. I've taken enough from you already. You haven't taken anything. Yes, I have. Your space, your food, your peace. You've all been kind, but I can't keep being a burden. You're not, Sarah. She looked at me with eyes that had aged years in just days. I know what I am. I know what the world sees when they look at me. A girl who made mistakes, a mother who couldn't keep her baby alive, someone to be pitied at best, scorned at worst. I won't bring that into your home anymore. Where will you go? Back to the shelter. Find work. Move forward, I guess. What other choice do I have? I wanted to argue, to insist she stay, but I also understood. Sometimes accepting help feels harder than struggling alone. Sometimes charity, no matter how kindly meant, feels like defeat. You're stronger than you think, I said instead. She laughed bitterly. Everyone keeps saying that, but strength doesn't mean anything if you have nowhere to use it, if you're just surviving day to day with no future to work toward. So make a future, even a small one, even just tomorrow. Is that what you do? Just focus on tomorrow? I thought about it, about how I navigated each day, one problem at a time, never looking too far ahead because the view was too overwhelming. Yeah, I admitted, pretty much. Tomorrow and the day after that. String enough tomorrows together and eventually you have a life. What if I don't want just a life? What if I want something more? Then you fight for it. I don't know how exactly, but you fight. We sat in silence for a while, watching the city settle into evening. Street lights flickered on. Vendors called out last sales. Somewhere a child laughed, the sound carrying clear and bright through the warm air. Thank you, Nadia said finally. Not just for the shelter and food, but for seeing me, for treating me like a person instead of a problem or a scandal. You have no idea how rare that is. You shouldn't have to thank people for basic human decency. Maybe not, but I do anyway because it's that precious. Nadia left the next morning early, with a bag of clothes Mama had gathered from neighbours who didn't ask too many questions. Fatima picked her up in a rickshaw, heading back to the shelter that would be her temporary home while she figured out next steps. At the door, she hugged each of us, Mama longest, then me, then even Karim, who blushed and looked at his feet. You're good people, she said simply. Don't let the world convince you otherwise. And then she was gone, disappearing down the stairs and into whatever came next. The apartment felt strange after she left, both emptier and somehow larger. The sofa where she'd slept still held the indent of her body. The bathroom still smelled faintly of the soap she'd used. Little reminders that she'd been real, that this had happened. Will we see her again? Karim asked. I don't know, Mama said honestly. Maybe, or maybe she'll move on and build a new life somewhere else. Either way, I hope she's okay. Me too, Karim said softly. Life returned to normal quickly after that, or what passed for normal in our household. School, work, homework, bills, the rhythms of survival that had defined us before and would continue to define us after. But something had shifted in me, some understanding about the world and my place in it that I hadn't possessed before. 6 months passed, winter came, then left. The monsoons returned, bringing their familiar soundtrack of rain on metal. I'd just turned 17. Karim was 7.5 and suddenly obsessed with cricket. Mama's hair had more grey in it, but she smiled more often. We were managing. Barely, but managing. One afternoon in July, almost exactly a year after that first Tuesday, a letter arrived. My name was written on the front in careful, deliberate handwriting. Inside was a single page. Dear Sarah, I hope this finds you well. I wanted you to know that I'm doing better. Not good, maybe, but better. I found work at a clinic in another city, just administrative stuff, answering phones and filing paperwork. It's honest work, and it's mine. I think about Hamza every single day. I don't think I'll ever stop. But because of you and your family, I got to honour his life instead of hiding it in shame. You gave me space to grieve like a mother, not like a criminal. That's a gift I'll never be able to repay. I'm trying to rebuild. Some days are harder than others. I have nightmares, I cry at unexpected moments. I see babies everywhere and my arms ache with emptiness. But I'm trying. That counts for something, right? Thank you for seeing me as human when the world wanted me to disappear. Thank you for your kindness when I had nothing to offer in return. Thank you for showing me that good people still exist. With gratitude, Nadia, I read it 3 times, then showed it to Mama. She read it once, slowly, then handed it back with tears in her eyes. She's going to make it, I said. Maybe, Mama replied. Or maybe she'll struggle for years. Maybe she'll carry this pain forever, but she's carrying it with her head up, not in hiding. That's something. I kept that letter, pinned it to the wall above my study desk where I could see it every day, a reminder of something important that I was still trying to articulate. Life continued. I finished school, started college. A local one, nothing fancy, but higher education nonetheless. Studied social work because what else was I going to do with everything I'd learned? Kareem grew taller, louder, more confident. Started asking about girls and cricket and all the normal concerns of adolescence. Sometimes I missed the little boy he'd been, the one who still believed the world was simple. Mama eventually started dating someone, a widower from her hospital who was kind and patient and made her laugh. Baba never called. Eventually we stopped expecting him to. We managed. We survived. We even occasionally thrived. And through it all, I carried Nadia's story with me. Carried Hamza's tiny grave. Carried the memory of those 3 days when our small apartment held more grief than should fit in such a small space. Years later, I was 23 by then, working at a women's shelter not unlike the one where Nadia had stayed, I started noticing patterns. The women who came through our doors all had different stories, but they shared common threads. Abuse, abandonment, poverty, judgment. Society's failure disguised as personal failure. I saw Nadia in all of them. Saw myself. Saw Mama. Saw every woman who'd ever been told she was too much or not enough, who'd been blamed for circumstances beyond her control, who'd been expected to survive without support, and then judged for how she managed. One evening, a girl came to the shelter. She couldn't have been more than 18, pregnant and terrified, with a face that could have been Nadia's a decade earlier. She sat in the intake room, arms wrapped tight around herself, trying to disappear. I sat across from her and said the words Mama had said all those years ago. "You're safe here. We'll figure out what comes next together." She looked up at me with eyes full of fear and desperate hope. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." And I smiled, thinking of a rainy Tuesday and a girl holding her dead baby and the chain of kindness that had started long before I was born and would continue long after I was gone. "Because someone helped me once," I said simply. "Because that's what we do. Because you're not alone, even though it feels like you are. I don't have anything to offer in return. I'm not asking for anything in return. I'm just asking you to survive. And then, when you're able, to help someone else who needs it. That's how this works. We carry each other." I think about Nadia often. Wonder where she is now, if she's happy, if she found peace. I hope she did. I hope she found love again. Hope she learned to forgive herself for the guilt she carried that was never hers to bear. But more than that, I hope she knows what she taught me. She taught me that grace isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about showing up for someone when they're drowning, even if all you can offer is a hand to hold. She taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just survive. Just keep breathing when everything in you wants to stop. She taught me that love isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's as quiet as opening your door in the rain, as simple as saying you're not alone. She taught me that we're all just trying to survive our own storms, carrying weights we shouldn't have to carry alone. And she taught me that the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward in ways we'll never fully understand. Last week, I volunteered to speak at a conference about supporting vulnerable women. They asked me why I did this work, what drove me. I thought about telling the easy story about statistics and systemic issues and policy recommendations. All true, all important. But instead, I told them about a rainy Tuesday when I was 16. About a girl named Nadia and her son Hamza. About my mother who chose compassion over convenience. About how a few days changed the entire direction of my life. I do this work, I said, because someone once showed me that the worst moments of our lives don't have to define us. That grace is possible even in grief. That we can choose every single day to be the kind of people who show up for each other. After my talk, a young woman approached me. She had tears in her eyes. "I was that girl," she said quietly. 5 years ago, pregnant and alone and convinced I'd be better off dead. Someone at a shelter helped me without judgment, gave me a place to stay, helped me find my feet. I think about her every day. Did you ever thank her? I tried. Wrote her letters, but she'd moved on to another shelter, another city. I never found her. She paused. So I became a social worker instead. Figured I'd thank her by doing what she did. Paying it forward, I guess. I hugged this stranger, this woman carrying her own Nadia story, her own chain of kindness that stretched backward and forward through time. She knows, I told her. Wherever she is, she knows, and she's proud. It's raining again tonight. That same hollow drumming on the metal roof of my apartment, bigger now than the one I grew up in, but still modest, still real. I'm sitting at my desk, writing this story, and through the window I can see the city blurred by rain. Somewhere out there, someone is struggling, someone is alone, someone is wondering if they'll survive the night. I can't help everyone, can't fix systemic problems with good intentions, can't erase anyone's pain or grief, but I can show up, I can offer a hand, I can say you're not alone and mean it. That has to be enough, because the alternative, turning away, closing doors, deciding who deserves help and who doesn't, that's how we lose our humanity. That's how we become complicit in suffering we could have eased. Mama called earlier tonight. She and her husband are doing well. Kareem is in university now, studying engineering and still obsessed with cricket. Baba never came back, and we've made peace with that. Some chapters end without resolution. I'm proud of you, Mama said before we hung up, for the work you're doing, for the person you've become. You taught me, I replied. That night with Nadia, you showed me what it means to choose kindness even when it's inconvenient. You chose first, she countered. You brought her home. I just followed your lead. Maybe we're both right. Maybe kindness isn't about who starts the chain, but about keeping it going, about each of us doing our small part in a vast network of care that holds the world together. I still have Nadia's letter. It's worn now, the creases soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. The ink has faded, but the words remain clear. Thank you for seeing me as human when the world wanted me to disappear. That's it, isn't it? That's the whole thing. See people as human. Treat them with dignity. Show up when you can. Do what's possible, even if it's not enough. String together enough small acts of kindness and maybe, just maybe, you change the world. Not all at once, not in dramatic, sweeping gestures, but one person at a time, one rainy Tuesday at a time, one moment of choosing compassion over convenience. The rain is letting up now. The drumming is softer, gentler, like the world taking a deep breath after holding it too long. Somewhere out there, Nadia is living her life. Maybe she's remarried, maybe she has other children, maybe she's still alone, still grieving, still carrying the weight of that day. Or maybe, and this is what I choose to believe, maybe she's become someone who helps others. Maybe she's the one opening doors now. Maybe she's the hand reaching out in the storm. Maybe she's telling her own story to someone who needs to hear it. That's how it works, I think. We carry each other's stories. We learn from each other's pain. We build on each other's kindness until it becomes something larger than any of us alone could create. We become a chorus of voices saying, "You matter. You're not alone. We'll figure this out together." And sometimes, when we're very lucky, that's enough to help someone survive until sunrise. I think about that 7-year-old boy I used to know, Kareem, standing in the rain, looking up at me and saying, "We have to help her, Sarah. We have to." Out of the mouths of children, right? The simple moral clarity we lose as we grow older and learn all the reasons why we can't, why we shouldn't, why it's not our problem. But he was right. We did have to help, not because it was easy or convenient or even particularly smart, but because that's what humans do, or should do, or at least can choose to do when faced with another person's suffering. We help, we show up, we do what we can with what we have where we are, and we trust that somewhere down the line someone will do the same for us when our turn comes to need help, because it will come. That turn, it comes for all of us eventually. The rain falls on everyone, the storms don't discriminate. But neither does kindness, neither does grace, neither does the simple act of opening your door and saying, "Come in, you're safe here, we'll figure it out together." So that's my story. That's what I learned on a rainy Tuesday when I was 16 years old and thought I knew everything. I learned that I knew nothing. I learned that life is complicated and messy and unfair in ways that make you want to scream. I learned that people will judge and condemn and turn away from suffering because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging their own vulnerability. But I also learned that some people won't. Some people will choose compassion. Some people will risk their own comfort to ease someone else's pain. And those people, those everyday heroes who show up quietly without fanfare or recognition, They're what keep the world from sliding into complete darkness. They're what give me hope on the hard days. They're why I keep doing this work, even when it feels futile. Because I remember Mama's face when she chose to help Nadia. I remember Dr. Qureshi and Fatima and all the women at the burial who stood in solidarity with someone they barely knew. I remember that we chose kindness, and that choice mattered. Maybe it didn't change the world. Maybe Hamza still died and Nadia still suffered, and all we did was make it marginally less terrible. But maybe that's enough. Maybe making things marginally less terrible, one person at a time, is how the world gets changed. Not through grand gestures or sweeping reforms, though we need those too, but through small acts, open doors, offered hands, whispered words of comfort in the dark, through seeing each other's humanity and choosing to honour it even when it's inconvenient, through standing in the rain together because none of us can control the weather, but we can decide who faces it alone. The rain has stopped now. The city is quiet in that way. It only gets late at night when even the traffic pauses to breathe. Tomorrow I'll go back to the shelter. There will be new women, new stories, new sorrows to witness. I'll do what I can. It won't be enough, it never is, but I'll show up anyway. Because that's what Nadia taught me, what Mama taught me, what every person who's ever chosen kindness over cruelty taught me. We show up, we do what we can, we trust that it matters even when we can't see the results. We be the person we needed when we were drowning. And we hope, we have to hope, that somewhere someone is doing the same. That somewhere the chain continues. That somewhere someone is opening their door in the rain and saying those magic words. You're not alone. We'll figure this out together. If this story touched something in your heart, if it reminded you of your own rainy Tuesday, your own moment of needing help or giving it, I'd be honoured to hear about it. Drop a whisper in the comments below, share your story if you'd like. Tell me about the person who showed up for you or the moment you showed up for someone else. These stories matter. Your story matters. And if you'd like to stay close to hear more of these truths we carry in the quiet spaces of our hearts, just subscribe. I'll be here, waiting to share the next story with you, because we're all just walking each other home through the storm. And sometimes a story is just another way of saying, you're not alone in this. None of us are. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing kindness in whatever small ways you can. The rain will come again. It always does. But so will we. Ready to open our doors, ready to extend our hands, ready to whisper into the darkness, hold on. Help is coming. You matter. You're not alone. That's all any of us can do. And sometimes beautifully, miraculously, impossibly, that's enough.